Everyone in that part of Wisconsin had a story about the abandoned road, but nobody wanted to be the one to tell it. They glanced toward the treeline or down at the counter whenever it came up, as if saying too much might attract something that listened. I thought it was just superstition until I drove out there myself. The first time I heard about it was in a small diner where the coffee tasted burnt and a silent game played on an old television. A truck driver at the counter mentioned a road that never showed up right on maps and said his navigation froze whenever he got close. The waitress told him to stop talking about it and changed the subject so fast it felt almost like panic. That reaction hooked me more than the story. I travel around Wisconsin collecting haunted legends and filming strange places for a small but growing channel. I have met skeptics, believers, drunks, and bored teenagers, but I had never seen people truly afraid to even say the name of a road. When I asked the waitress about it after the driver left, she pretended not to understand. Her hand shook just enough that I noticed when she refilled my cup and spilled a ring of coffee on the table. Finally, she leaned in and said very quietly that if I cared about my life, I should stay on the main highways and leave forgotten roads alone. The truck driver was less guarded, maybe because he had already decided he would never return there alone. Out in the parking lot, with the wind tugging at his jacket, he told me there was a strip of cracked pavement somewhere between two county lines that nobody used anymore. According to him, the county stopped maintaining it after too many crashes, disappearances, and reports that never made it into any file the public could see. I tried to get a name or a clear location, but whenever anyone in town realized what we were discussing, the conversation died. An old man at a corner table muttered that it used to be part of an older highway before they moved the route and pretended the old path did not exist. Then he caught my eye and shook his head slowly, warning me not to go there, especially after dark. But the looks on their faces stayed with me long after I left the diner. You can tell when people use fear to control a story and when they are afraid of the story itself. This was the second kind, the kind that makes adults talk in the same hushed tone children use in the dark. The next afternoon I drove out with my camera bag on the seat beside me and a knot in my stomach I blamed on bad sleep. I followed the directions the driver had sketched with his finger on the back of a receipt. The farther I got from town, the quieter the world became, as if someone were turning the volume down on every sound at once. Houses and mailboxes thinned out and then vanished, replaced by fields and thick walls of trees. My navigation hesitated as I turned onto a narrow county road that already looked half forgotten. The screen flickered once, recalculated, then froze with my location icon stuck in place. I kept going and followed the real pavement instead of the dead blue line, telling myself I would turn back if it started to feel wrong. A few miles later I saw a smaller side road on the right. The pavement there was darker and badly cracked, half buried under weeds and fallen branches that no one had bothered to clear. No sign, no name, just a strip of old asphalt disappearing into the forest and vanishing around a shallow bend. The air felt heavier the moment I slowed beside it, like the breath in a closed room that had not been opened in years. I parked at the edge and sat with my hands on the wheel, listening to the idle and to the silence beyond it. The forest on both sides looked ordinary, just pines and maples and choked undergrowth. Yet the line where the abandoned pavement began felt like a border, a seam between this world and something a little misaligned. My camera was already recording by the time I stepped out and walked onto it. Up close, the road looked like the skeleton of a highway. Grass and small saplings grew through long cracks and the faint ghost of a center line showed under patches of dirt. There were no fresh tire marks, no crushed cans, no footprints, nothing that said anyone had been there in years. I walked down the middle and the quiet closed around me. No birds called, no insects buzzed, no distant machinery or planes cut through the sky. The only sounds were the crunch of loose gravel under my shoes and my own breathing. It did not take long for my car to vanish from sight behind the curve. The trees overhead leaned closer to each other until the daylight turned a muted green, like water stain on glass. The farther I went, the more I felt like I was walking into a long tunnel. After 10 minutes I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Every tree along the road leaned very slightly inward, as if the trunks had been pulled toward the strip of pavement over many years. The tilt was small but constant and made the road feel like the center of some slow, invisible pressure. I told myself it was soil drift and wind, nothing more. You reach for ordinary reasons when nothing ordinary feels true anymore. Still, each step forward felt like walking deeper into something that did not want to be disturbed. The first sign that other people had been there came just beyond the next turn. A rusted sedan sat half on the pavement and half in the ditch, its nose buried in dry mud and its body eaten by time. The windshield was gone and weeds wrapped around the dead tires like ropes. There were no plates, no stickers, and no obvious sign of who had owned it. The inside was stripped almost bare, but a faded air freshener still hung from the broken stem of the mirror. It moved just slightly even though the air around me was completely still. I filmed it from a few angles and spoke quietly into the camera. Hearing my own voice steadied me a little, a reminder that this was still work and not just a mistake. Yet the sound seemed to fall flat in the air, like the forest refused to carry it more than a few meters. I walked on and the trees pressed closer with every step. Twice I heard a slow shift in the woods beside the road, like a person changing their stance on dry leaves. Each time I stopped, the sound died so completely that my ears started to ring. By then I was far enough in that going back felt almost as long as going forward. The road ahead bent gently and the branches above were so dense that only thin lines of sky remained. The air had grown colder and a faint mist clung to the low brush. My phone buzzed once in my pocket and I nearly shouted in relief. I pulled it out, hoping I had regained signal or at least the correct time. The screen glowed but showed no bars, no clock, only the battery symbol and my own face reflected with the trees behind me. I tried to restart it and nothing happened. The camera in my other hand kept recording without a problem, framing every shaky breath and nervous glance. Whatever had gone wrong affected only my link to the world beyond the trees. The next sound started as I approached what looked like the faint trace of a side path. A narrow line of bare earth crossed the road and vanished into dense undergrowth. From somewhere along that unseen track came a faint, careful tapping. It sounded like a single knuckle knocking on wood. Tap, pause, tap, the rhythm slow and patient. It did not echo, it simply arrived and stayed in the air. I pointed the camera toward the undergrowth and zoomed as far as the lens allowed. There was nothing but branches and shadow, no animal movement, no sign of a person. The tapping continued, as steady as before. My mouth had gone dry, but I forced myself to speak for the recording. I said that it was probably a loose limb rubbing against another tree and tried to laugh at my own jumpiness. The sound of that laugh felt wrong the moment it left my mouth. The tapping stopped at once. The forest seemed to tense, as if every tree were listening. My heart pounded hard enough that my chest ached. Behind me something long and heavy scraped along the pavement. I spun around, nearly slipping on loose gravel. The road behind me was empty, just cracked asphalt and leaning trees and thin mist. But the scrape had been close and slow, too deliberate to ignore. It had sounded like something being dragged along the broken surface without hurry. There were no new marks on the road, no disturbed stones or scuffs. The absence of any trace made the hair rise on my arms. A thicker mist began to gather over the pavement, curling around my shoes and sliding along the cracks. I looked up, expecting clouds or a sudden change in weather, but the canopy overhead was steady. The fog was coming from the road itself. The temperature dropped so fast that I had to clamp my jaw to keep my teeth from chattering. The far bend of the road blurred behind a white veil that thickened every second. Every instinct in my body begged me to turn around. I told the camera I was heading back, my voice thin and strained. A second later the same sentence drifted out of the fog in front of me, spoken in almost my own voice. The timing was wrong and the words sounded stretched, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The echo should have come from behind me, not ahead. The cadence was just far enough from mine that my skin crawled. Something in that mist had heard me and decided to wear my voice. My grip tightened around the camera until my fingers hurt. The fog climbed slowly to my calves, swirling in small circles that broke apart when I stared at them. The forest was silent except for my own ragged breathing. I turned and started walking back the way I had come, forcing each step to stay measured. At first I heard whispers moving with me, just behind my shoulders, too soft to understand but loud enough to feel. Then they faded and were replaced by that dragging sound again, always at the edge of hearing. Every few steps I had to fight the urge to break into a run. The road ahead seemed to stretch and repeat the same gentle curve. Time felt slippery, as if I had stepped off the normal track of minutes. Just when my panic was about to spill over, I saw the shape of the sedan in the ditch ahead. The rusted roof and empty windows had never looked so welcome. I knew then that if I kept going I would eventually reach my own car. A figure stood in the middle of the road between me and the last bend. It was too tall to be a normal person and its outline looked slightly wrong, the arms hanging a little too low and the shoulders a little too wide. The air around it seemed darker, as if the light had pulled back. I stopped so fast that the camera strap swung against my chest. The figure did not move, did not tilt its head, did not raise a hand. It simply occupied that part of the road like it had always stood there. I did not bring the camera to my face. Some part of me knew that seeing it more clearly would not help me escape. I trusted my eyes less than the cold certainty in my spine. Without thinking I stepped off the pavement into the trees to my right. Branches scratched my sleeves and caught in my hair, but I kept moving, trying to stay parallel to the road. The ground sloped and shifted under my feet, but anything felt safer than walking straight toward that shape. Every few steps I glanced between the trunks at the strip of road. Each time I looked the figure was still there, turned slightly toward the trees where I moved. It did not follow, yet it never seemed to grow smaller. At last the trees thinned and I stumbled back onto the pavement. The rusted sedan with the little air freshener stood in the ditch just ahead, solid and familiar and harmless. I knew then that the last stretch to my car was clear. This time I did not try to walk. I ran, the camera bouncing against my chest with every step. The air grew warmer and the light sharpened as I moved. My car came into view around the final curve, sitting exactly where I had left it. I reached it with shaking hands and dug out the keys, dropping them once before getting the door open. Some stubborn part of my mind made me look back one last time. The abandoned road behind me was empty. No mist, no figures, only cracked pavement and leaning trees. It looked ordinary again. Relief washed through me so hard that my knees almost gave out. Then, from somewhere far down the road, I heard my own voice call my name. The sound was stretched and distant, but it was mine. I slid into the seat, slammed the door and drove away without checking the mirror. The navigation came back to life as I reached the main road, as if nothing had happened. Seeing other cars made it feel real. I kept driving. I did not look back. Back at the motel I reviewed the footage. The road, the car, and the mist all showed up clearly. The place where the figure had stood was only a trembling gray blur and the audio around that moment was filled with layered whispering, including my own voice saying things I did not remember. I will never go near that road again and I do not tell people where it is. The locals already know and the ones who do not are safer that way. Some roads take you home, some lead nowhere and some, like that one, do not want you to return once you decide to follow them.